So, John, Mr. Roskelly. So, I have the pleasure of meeting John Roskelly, born December 1st of 48, and you're from Spokane originally, right?
That's correct.
So, tell us about your experience climbing Everest.
Well, I was on Everest 5 times. It's
Five
not,
times.
yeah, sometimes it takes more than one time to climb a peak. And in the case of Everest, I tried multiple times to do without oxygen and no Sherpas.
Mm-hmm.
And then finally I decided I'd just take my son when he turned 20. And even though it was the 50th anniversary of the first ascent by Sir Edmund Hillary and Tenzing Norgay, it was fairly crowded. That's the first time I'd been on Everest in all 5 times, the 4 previous trips, that there was a crowd. Usually it was just one expedition, a group of people. But in 2003, when I climbed Everest with my son, Jess, it was crowded. But it was on the Tibet side, so it wasn't as bad as it is now.
What was, how would you describe your experience? Like, what kind of training did you have to go through to do this? Because I know you have to have a lot of training to do this.
Well, physically, you have to be fairly strong to and trained up. I mean, I usually, before the 2003 trip, I did a lot of trail running, weightlifting, climbing, and I was in good shape when I left there. I was only 53 at the time,
Yeah.
54, and so. And my son, of course, was in great shape because he was only 20,
Yeah.
and an athlete and a climber. So that wasn't the concern really. It was more the difficulties are in the weather and the avalanche conditions and staying healthy, because you do get an opportunity when you're going through Tibet or Nepal or India or any of those countries. You can get a parasite, which would stop you from progressing.
And one of the things I'm about to ask is, what was the scariest part? Like, did you ever deal with any of that stuff? I know it's kind of personal, but did you ever deal with that kind of stuff?
Scary?
No, like the parasites and
Oh yeah,
stuff.
I've had multiple different types of parasites:
But
amoebic dysentery, worms, whipworm,
shingles.
giardia. I've had malaria.
You've had malaria? Where did you get that?
I got that in Pakistan. I've had spinal meningitis. I mean, I've run the gamut in problems.
But what about, did you pick up anything on that Everest thing?
I didn't. I felt great all the way up and all the way back to Kathmandu, but I watched what I was eating and drinking, and as time has gone by,
Yeah.
over the years we've developed filters for water. Originally, when I went to Nepal in 1973, and through all the years, subsequent years up until maybe 1990 or something, it was difficult to filter water so you could remove the parasites. But they developed enough types of filters, water filters, that were really good that it worked a lot better, and I haven't had a real problem ever since.
Did Joyce go with you that year in 73?
In 73, no, that was, most expeditions are private expeditions. You can't have your spouse, you can't, have your friends. It's, you're a group of climbers. You're there to climb a mountain, and it's not a vacation.
And how many people when you climbed to the top of Everest were there? How many other climbers?
Well, we got up very early. I got everyone up at 1 o'clock.
In the morning?
Our camp, no, at 11 at night. And because I was afraid that there would be too many people slow people on the roads.
Mm-hmm.
Above our camp at 27,000. So I decided to get up even earlier than we had planned. We got out of the tent at midnight, and we were on the summit, I believe, at 7. maybe 6:30, and we were alone. It was just us, and then there was two Sherpas and Jess and I, but the problem on the north ridge of Everest that we were at, and right near the top,
Yeah.
is that there's a very difficult section called the second step.
Yeah.
And on the second step, there was a maybe 30 or 40 Chinese coming up the second step, and they were kind of just right after the other and using the only rope, the only good rope. The only way to get around them was to grab an old rope that was hanging there and kind of hand line down, using, being very careful, but hand line down and try to get around them, because otherwise we would have been stuck up there waiting for these people to get off the rope forever. So, and it's cold.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we managed to just hand line down the second step and get around the Chinese, and then get around the Irish and get around the British. There were quite a few people on the ridge that morning.
And what about did you ever climb like the real Himalayas at all?
The real Himalayas.
Well, what would be called the Himalayas? Did you ever climb the Himalayan mountains?
Well, Everest is in the Himalayas.
Oh, it is?
Yes, and Makalu.
Where's Makalu?
Makalu is to the east of Everest, about 12 miles.
Is it in Nepal?
Yes, Makalu is the 5th highest mountain in the world.
What about the one that's by the Indian border between Nepal and India? Did you climb that one?
Nanda Devi.
Did you climb it?
Uh-huh. Got the summit of that, and it's closed since I climbed it in 1976, in 1986, I believe.
And now you can't?
They closed the peak to mountaineering.
How come?
Well, there are several reasons. One, Nanda Devi is located in the center of a surrounding peaks that are 22,000, 23,000 feet high. So there's only one entryway into the peak, and that's up the Rishi Gorge. And the Indian government found that there was a lot of damage to the environment and wildlife. And
Because of it?
Yeah, they created a UNESCO park, which is a world national park.
Yeah.
And they basically are keeping everyone out of this sanctuary, they call it.
And
That includes the locals.
oh yeah. And John, another thing, just for the video, I have to ask you, man, outside of Everest, what is Nepal like? Because you've been, like, what's it like? What foods do they eat? What's their culture like?
Okay, well, there's numerous tribes in Nepal.
Yeah.
They eat pretty much the same thing, but a little bit different. In the lowlands, they eat a lot of rice and dal. Dal is a lentil.
Yeah.
And there's yellow dal, red dal, brown dal, and they pour that over the rice. They eat a lot of vegetables.
Yeah.
But as you go higher, like in the Sherpa country,
Yeah.
then you start to get in more potatoes and meat, like yak and zo meat.
They eat yak in Tibet.
Yes, they do. They eat goats. Goat is very popular. Sheep is popular. But more meat and potatoes in the Sherpa, the higher elevations.
Awesome.
And Nepal is mostly mountainous. But as you get to the southern border, you get into an area called a Terai. And that is very swampy, more vegetated, large trees, rhinos, elephants, tigers, and different types of birds.
Do you like Kathmandu? Can you describe Kathmandu to us?
Well, I used to like Kathmandu because there wasn't, in 1973 when I first went there wasn't that much traffic there.
Now it's full of traffic.
Now it is just incredibly crowded with tourism and people moving in there.
And what's important in their culture, the Nepalese culture?
Their religion.
Buddhist? It's the birth of Buddhism.
Hindu. Most of them are Hindu.
Oh.
Yeah.
And as
you get into Sherpa country, then you get into Buddhist. But Most of the tribes are Hindus of some sort.
Oh, great. And how are the people in Nepal? Very kind.
Very kind, very nice.
And another thing, what's Tibet like? Because this is kind of all the culture of the Himalayan countries in this video, because you've
Yeah.
been to a lot of them.
Well, Tibet is a high plateau. Okay, there's not many areas that are lower than 14,000 feet. So when you land in Lhasa, the capital city,
Yeah.
where the Potala Palace is, that's where the Dalai Lama lives, or used to live until the Chinese took over. Then it's probably pretty much 15,000 feet, and then if you drive around, you go over 18,000 foot passes. And it used to have, Tibet used to be full of monasteries, Buddhist monasteries. And then the Chinese came in, and I can't tell you the exact date. I think
57.
it was 57, okay? And they bombed and blew up all these monasteries,
That
except
is
for
so
maybe the
sad.
Potala Palace and the Jokan Temple and the monastery in Shigatse.
Really sad.
It's terrible to go
And
to
how-
drive through there and see all this rubble
And-
from these fantastic monasteries.
And how would you describe the people of Tibet?
For the most part, I get along with Tibetans really well. They're a
Hospitable.
very tough people, and they can be pretty aggressive at times.
They have houses with no chimneys.
Right. A lot of times you'll go to these countries and they have a center fire in the room, and the house may be, well, in their case, they do a lot of tents.
Yeah.
They used to be made from yak skins. Now they have fabric, but they don't they don't do well with a chimney.
And tell the fans, what's your favorite country and why is it your favorite country?
Well, my favorite country is Bhutan, and it is east of Nepal and Sikkim. Sikkim is a sliver of India that goes up through between the two countries.
And it's sandwiched between China and India.
Yeah.
But what makes Bhutan your favorite country?
Well, I think it's it's like 100 years before, like it's like Nepal 100 years before, and there's hardly any damage by tourism. The king is very concerned about the environment, so their
very clean.
trees are not harvested. They have a few dams down low, but most of the rivers and mountains you cannot climb in Bhutan anymore.
And what was climbing Tiger's Nest like? Did you go inside the Buddhist temples at all?
Yeah, I took my trekkers up. It's a short trek of about 3 to 4 miles, but you gain a lot of elevation. And the Tiger's Nest is up against the cliff, and you can go in, and some of the areas of the monastery you can go into, and others you can't.
Okay, and to wrap things up, I'd like to ask, what's it like in India and Pakistan, the other two Himalaya countries? How would you describe those two?
Well, India is very, very crowded. As you can imagine,
Now the most populated nation out there.
that is exactly correct. And but as you leave the larger cities, it's not as bad. You can get away from people in India by going on treks and getting into the higher hills.
Yeah.
And really, that's good. Pakistan, I haven't been back to since 1981, and I know it's crowded, but they built roads into areas that I used to have to walk into.
Which place between Pakistan and India was the friendliest?
Between Pakistan and India, I would say they're about equal. I mean, to Americans.
And which country would you say had the best food?
I would have to say Nepal.
And did you enjoy climbing the Alps in Switzerland?
Absolutely. Switzerland is one. If Bhutan, if I hadn't visited Bhutan, Switzerland would be my top choice. I mean, it is so clean. Even the cows are clean.
And to wrap things up, what was your favorite part about climbing the Alps in Europe?
The pastries
And
in town.
oh, and one crucial thing that I forgot, but I want the fans to know this. Your son, Jess, youngest person in history to climb Mount Everest, he passed away. What kind of avalanche or mountain was that he was climbing, and what exactly happened?
It's kind of a difficult story, but it's he and two Austrians, David Lama and Hans-Jörg Auer, two very experienced climbers, well known. They were on a peak called Mount House
In Alaska.
in British Columbia,
Yeah.
and it was in the spring,
Mm-hmm.
1990 or 2009.
Yeah.
19.
19.
Yeah, I'm getting confused. And they were avalanched as they were coming down from the summit, and that's pretty. It's pretty common to have avalanches in the afternoon because the sun heats the slopes and the snow changes, and they pretty much didn't have a chance to get out of it.
Did the Austrians get killed too?
All three were swept and taken to the bottom of the peak.
Oh man, I'm so sorry, but hey man, thank you so much for your time.
Yeah.
Mr. Roskelly, this video will probably be up at around next week or so. June probably 6th is when you guys as the fans will see it, and I'll send you the URL.
Alrighty.
And I'll get a photo of you on Everest in the thumbnail.
Okay. Alrighty.
Don't forget to subscribe, fans.